The global feminist movement is possibly facing its worst assault in the post-World War II history. Gender advocates worry that the resurgence of nationalism and the far right globally is leading to the reversal of hard-earned gains of previous decades. The re-election of the Trump administration in the US has emerged as another major cause of concern. Feminist organizations, government representatives, and various civil society organizations from across the world, including Global South countries, plan to come together in Melbourne this April for the Women Deliver conference. I spoke to Paola Salwan Dahar, Senior Director for Collective Action at Women Deliver, to discuss some of these pressing issues. Listen in to what she has to say. There has been a gravitational shift in global politics in the last decade or so. Nationalism and right-wing movements have been on the rise, be it in the US, Europe, or across the world for that matter. The election of US President Donald Trump has presented with an entirely new set of challenges for the global feminist movement, human rights organizations. US, which was seen as a bastion of women rights, progressive movements, human rights, has been pulling back from its global responsibility. To discuss these issues, we have with us Paola Salwan Dahar, the Director of Collective Action at Women Deliver. Thank you very much for joining us at Daily Geopolitics. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
What are your initial observations on the nationalist movements that have been on the rise and how they are affecting the global feminist movement, for the better or for the worse?
Thank you so much for asking this question. I think it is really important to center the rise of the far-right agenda because they are targeting different areas, and all of these kind of interlinked areas have a disproportionate impact on women and girls. The rise of nationalism and of nationalist agendas in different countries, in Europe, in the US, we're seeing that agenda being also on the rise in certain Latin American countries, really kind of centers gender inequality as one of their main tenets. We're seeing more and more, coupled with the nationalist discourse, we're seeing a very sexist, misogynistic discourse that really portrays women as needing to be subversion and submitted to their husband. We're seeing a resurgence of really harmful gender stereotypes, of really like this push really to go back to so-called traditional values where women should not be working outside the home, should not have community aspirations to kind of engage in political life. But mostly really where this pushback has been focusing really has been on the right to bodily autonomy and on sexual and reproductive rights. There is this global discourse, and this discourse is being coupled by policies and laws. We're seeing the rollback, that predates the current Trump administration, the rollback on Roe v. Wade in the US, and the increasing pushback on access to abortion, on access to comprehensive sexuality education, on contraception. There's also a really strong pushback against the right to bodily autonomy of girls and adolescent girls specifically. And all of these kind of targeted attacks are the entry point to also erode wider democratic guarantees and human rights writ large. And so the far-right agendas that are very well organized across borders, we're seeing kind of this conservative international take hold, is affecting different countries at different stages, but it's becoming more and more kind of hegemonic. And I think that the role of feminist movement is to also organize and to strategize together. And this is what we're trying to organize at the Women Deliver conference that will take place in NARM, in Melbourne, in Australia, at the end of April of this year.
My next question is about the conference that's happening in Melbourne in April. As you mentioned, we are seeing a whole new set of unprecedented, if I may use that word, funding cuts and attacks on feminist movements spearheaded by the US and other right-wing leaders across the world. What's the response you are getting to this upcoming conference, and how much significant is this conference taking place amid the current, global realities?
And, I think I'm also very grateful for this question, because the nationalist agenda that you are mentioning goes hand in hand with really dire attacks against multilateralism. And the multilateral system has never been perfect. We know that it has always been a system deeply steeped into colonialism, where, international law was submitted to a double standard, that not lives are considered to be equal in a lot of instances, but still, it is a system that has served women's rights activists and feminists quite well. We have a long history of leveraging global and multilateral spaces to further our agenda. And this kind of overarching discourse that multilateralism is dead and no longer serves any purpose, I think is really dangerous and is an autocratic discourse. And really, we don't want to see a world with no multilateralism. We really do not want to see a world where every country is kind of just looking inwards and building bigger walls and strengthening border policies and regulations, because that goes against basic human rights and international law. And so what we're really trying to achieve with this iteration of the Women Deliver conference is to provide kind of a soft landing space for different movements that are interested in social justice and gender equality. We really kind of want to open up a space of discussion, of dialogue, where we can build a broad united front across different movements and across different stakeholders. And we will launch what we have been working on, which is a global playbook that will provide a new vision, because there's this narrative also that is quite cynical, that this is the world that we have now, and basically it's useless to try and confront it, and it's useless to try and resist against it. And what we really want to provide is kind of a counter narrative, an alternative to this. The world that is currently being sold to us is quite dire, is quite depressing. And I don't know about you, but this is not the world that I want to live in. I want to live in a world where everyone has, their human rights respected. I want to see the inherent dignity of every human being respected. And, we're not alone in that. And so it's, how do we leverage as an organization, how do we leverage our convening power to make sure that this is a space where we can strategize on how to create this alternative. The response that we have gotten so far is quite enthusiastic, I have to say. I think that, the feedback that we've received is that this is very much needed, that this is a point in time where we need to come together. There's still a lot of value in kind of meeting in person, sitting down and rolling our sleeves and saying, okay, what is it that we can do now? What is it that we can do together? How can we recenter human rights? How can we recenter, scientific evidence in our conversations? How can we recenter gender justice, climate justice, economic justice, and how do we organize as a collective against the rise of fascistic and far-right agendas? So we are very much looking forward to the conference. I think there's a lot of joy in organizing it, and there's a lot of joy in our interactions with people who are planning on attending. We already have a senior government representative of different countries that have confirmed that they will be there, civil society organizations as well, members of the donor community. So it will be a broad range of stakeholders that will be present.
Would it be possible to get an idea about the names of the countries from which are sending representatives to this upcoming conference, just to get an idea the scope of the conference, how big it is going to be? And the second part to that would be what's the representation of Global South? Because we've seen that even though women in Western societies, in developed countries, they do have a significant say in shaping the public discourse. That's been missing in Global South due to various reasons, historical, be it colonialism or, the emerging realities. So, yeah, the Global South, what's the focus? Is the focus on Global South as well?
So definitely, and it's not by accident that this is the first regionally hosted Women Deliver conference. So it's the first time that it is hosted by a whole region, and this time it's the Oceania Pacific. We're very honored and humbled that the region is co-hosting this conference with us. And one of the reasons that we really wanted to have it in this region is because it is disproportionately affected by climate injustice and the climate crisis. And feminist organizations, have been very vocal and have been organizing for a long time. And in the countries of the global majority, they have been as well. And not only do they have a tradition of organizing, because I'm also from the global majority, but also we have this tradition of organizing in very volatile context, in context of climate crisis, in context of conflicts, of genocide, of protracted crisis, and so that's kind of the richness and the political savviness of feminists from the global south and countries of the global majority, is that yes, we're seeing the rise of the far right, especially in countries of the global north. At the same time, we remain unfazed because this is not our first rodeo. We have faced autocratic governments. We have faced conflicts. We have faced that level of injustice, and so we're really centering that level of expertise and political savviness at the conference. So there will be definitely Global South representation. We're also working with organizations and individuals from different countries across different regions to facilitate their participation. So that's kind of the first element of response. In terms of who has been confirmed, so we've published that yesterday. So I would also invite your viewers to visit our social media channels. We have representatives from Kiribati, we have representatives from Australia that have been confirmed, and we will keep announcing as representatives of different governments get confirmed. And the last thing that I think that I would like to say is really what we are centering this time is kind of this notion of transnational solidarity. How can we amplify each other's priorities as feminist movements? How can we ensure that we're not speaking over anyone and we are letting each feminist movement from their own context define their own priority? And what is the meaning of solidarity to us, and how do we embody this solidarity?
Sure. It's interesting, on a couple of occasions, you have suggested that there's a direct relation between far right and sexism, or the assault on feminism. Can you present us with any historical examples? Is there a historical precedent? I mean, is it in academic discourse? Could you elaborate on that point a bit more?
Sure. And I think that, across history, we have always seen that where is a push towards the far right or towards fascism, there is a very specific instrumentalization of women within that societal project. And women are made to play, a crucial role in social reproduction, because, they're the ones kind of reproducing the workforce, but they're also traditionally, because reproductive labor is gendered, they are the ones that are considered as being the ones raising the children, because it's kind of their natural role, and quote unquote, obviously. So every time there is a push towards the far right, there is a push towards going back to a very heteronormative, to a very traditional understanding of the nuclear family. And it's something that we are seeing a lot. There's this glamorization online of this simple life, where women are stay-at-home mothers, where their highest realization is to stay at home. We're seeing that with the phenomenon of tradwives, for instance, where it's being made almost appealing to young women and girls that this is what they should aspire to. Obviously, what this conversation doesn't include is, first of all, most of these tradwives are trying to sell you something. The second bit is that if, you lose economic independence, that makes you dependent on your husband, and therefore that curtails your freedom. So these are conversations that are not being had, and we're only seeing kind of the rosy picture of what it means to be a stay-at-home mother. And so that's just an example of how women are being instrumentalized to come like to support this societal project. And this is something, in the overall far-right discourse around, purity and purity of thought and the family. Women are being pushed to play a very specific role. I would like to highlight that there is a very strong dichotomy and contradiction between women who are pushing for this agenda, women who are occupying public space and who are kind of engaging into political discourse, and they are preaching this very static and this very oppressive model for other women. So I think that here also the hypocrisy needs to be called out, is that you are riding on the doors that feminism have opened for you, like you're riding that wave, but at the same time, you're preaching for a retrogression. And therefore, this is something that we are seeing currently now in the US, but that we were seeing in the 1930s when fascism was rising in Europe. There was really this very strong push, and it was glorified, and it's still glorified, that women, basically their highest honor would just be to bear children and raise them according to a certain ideology, and raise them to serve the capital and to serve the state and so quote unquote the nation. So this is a very dangerous rhetoric, because the added thing that we didn't see in the 30s that we're seeing now is that a lot of billionaires are really encouraging that discourse. We're seeing that play out online. The algorithm is really pushing that type of content. In parallel with what, with the tradwives, for instance, you have the rise of really masculinist, really harmful discourse, where you have, discourse, Andrew Tate and others, who are really saying out loud that women are inferior beings and that they should be dominated and sexually abused even. And these people are not losing their platforms. So this is creating online an atmosphere that is ripe for gender inequality and harmful gender stereotypes to flourish. And this is what we're seeing that has been different, is that now the role that technology is playing in the oppression of women and girls and the curtailing of our rights is very worrying.
Sure. If we talk about the rise of anti-immigration sentiment, be it in Europe or US, even Australia, from time to time there have been groups like Reclaim Australia or other right-wing groups that have been pushing for a stronger stance against immigration. And they have, as you mentioned, women are being stereotyped. Their role, like in conservative values, their role is they produce children, reproduce children, and be a part of a family, stay at home, raise children. So how is this anti-immigration sentiment? Is it also a disservice to the global feminist movement?
I mean, obviously, I feel like the global feminist movement is, thrives to be intersectional. We're really trying to have an intersectional approach. And if we are fighting for the rights of women, and if we are fighting for a feminist world means, a world without patriarchy, without exploitation and oppression of women. And we're talking about all women. And, women also migrate. We also have migration of women and girls, and they are disproportionately subjected to human rights violations as they do so. And I think beyond just kind of, breaking away from patriarchal dynamics, we're also interrogating all of the other systems of oppression that impact the lives of everyone, and disproportionately so of women and girls and marginalized communities, which include migrants and refugees. And also that dichotomy between migrants and refugees also needs to be questioned. And therefore, we cannot pretend to fight for the rights of women and girls and for gender justice without addressing the really harmful migration discourse and policies that we are seeing in a lot of global north countries that are steeped in racism and that are steeped in kind of othering other human beings and dehumanizing them. And this is something that as feminists, we cannot accept. None of us are free if some of us are still being oppressed. And therefore, we are definitely also looking and holding states accountable to their obligations under international law. We should not be dehumanizing anyone, and you should not be othering anyone. And what we are seeing in terms of how migrants are being treated is horrifying. We're seeing concentration camps being completely normalized. We're seeing the murder, the harassment, the arbitrary arrest of human beings, of children, of women and girls and men being completely normalized. And as I was mentioning at the beginning of the interview, we don't want to live in this world, right? And it's not a given. It doesn't have to stay like that. We have agency as human beings. We have the agency and the power to say no, and to try and hold states accountable. The impunity in which these policies are being passed and implemented is something that really needs to be resisted. There needs to be consequences for these policies.
Sure. I want to ask you about, the current Trump administration in the U.S. We have seen the U.S. president arguing with female reporters repeatedly in the White House, disparaging them. There was a clip when the U.S. president was imitating, mocking the transgender community as well. Coming from the office, coming from the person who is widely reputed to be the most powerful person in the world. Isn't it unknowing that, this is the person who occupies the most powerful seat in the world, he is making these sort of comments? What are your thoughts on this?
I think this is on par with the values that this administration has been elected on. If you read Project 2025, it is very clear that there is a disproportionate targeting on gender and on women and girls, and there is a very clear intent to erode gender equality and a very clear intent to erode the gains that have been made by women's rights activists and feminist activists as well. Being in the most powerful seat doesn't necessarily guarantee that you would honor that position in any shape or form. And I think that we also need to interrogate power. And that's what feminists do, right? We always interrogate power. The way that the president of the US is deciding to carry himself in his function is an emanation of sexism. I feel that, telling women reporters that they should smile more, that they're not smiling enough because they're very bad reporters, it contributes to, reinforcing gender stereotypes. It contributes to undermining, and it participates into this wider trend of undermining women that dare to be outspoken and that dare to be taking up space in political/public spaces. So it's just examples. The problem with quote unquote the most powerful person in the world currently doing this is that it emboldens and normalizes that type of behavior. You can, if you're young and impressionable, or if you're already leaning towards sexism, then you can think that it's okay. He's doing it, so it's okay. And that can only drive up instances of all kinds of violence against women and girls. And this is what worries us ultimately, is this normalization of a discourse and of behaviors publicly and privately against women and girls that will drive violence rates up, and they're already too high. So it needs to be called out, and it needs, and the perpetrators need to be held accountable. Because we have seen that gender equality benefits society. It's something that is, scientifically proven. The countries that have high rates of gender equality are countries and societies that overall fare better. So this type of behavior and ongoing and rampant sexism harms everyone. And this is something that feminists have always said, patriarchy harms everybody. And this is kind of our counterpoint to that type of behavior.
It's interesting that you're pointing out that, such behavior needs to be called out. Right now, on what we're witnessing is there's an apprehension among the global leaders, be it women leaders or anyone for that matter, to call out, the US president for his actions, for the bullying ways that he has resorted to with many countries. I understand that the global feminist movement, there's an effort on your part to forge solidarity, transnational solidarity, to call out such behavior, so that, but uh, how would you react to this stance being adopted by the global leaders, in general, who seem pretty much apprehensive to call the US president out on major issues, I mean, insults, bullying. You're seeing all, like inviting someone to White House, insulting that leader openly. That's pretty undiplomatic. So what are your expectations? And do you think there is a chickening out, if I may, on part of the global other world leaders and responding to the actions and policies of the US government? And I would also like to add to that even though there are funding cuts by the US under the Trump administration to various aid organizations, but is the vacuum, like who is in a position to fill that vacuum? Because there's an argument that the vacuum that the US is creating, China is the only country and it would buy more influence, but China, state. So yeah, your reaction to that, like, isn't it kind of a catch-22 situation?
I think that we are witnessing a profound change in terms of the world we live in terms of US imperialism versus a multipolar world that is emerging, with the BRICS on one hand, emerging, and, China, Qatar, and other powers that have been emerging for a while. This is not something that is new, and that are crafting a place for themselves, given kind of the loss of legitimacy to be diplomatic of the US superpower. On your question around world leaders and how they are responding to Trump, I think there is many layers. First of all, some world leaders may agree and may create and may have a united front with Trump and his ideology and the ideology behind Project 2025. Like I've mentioned, this conservative international that we are seeing emerge. So first of all, there might be a bunch of them that actually agree. For those who don't necessarily agree, I think that, in late stage capitalism, I think that really it is that the economic arguments and the bullying via tariffs and the threatening of national security of some countries as well that are influencing the response of many world leaders. The US is a big a huge economic force. It needs to be reckoned with, and therefore what they do and the tariffs that they slap on different countries have a direct impact on the economies of these countries. So that might come into the mix, I would say. Some may be just waiting for the wave, to recede, and another administration to come in. I cannot speak on behalf of world leaders, obviously, but I would like to say that I think, the Epstein files and I think similar scandals are really highlighting how the economic elites form just like one kind of international network that really need to be beyond leaders. We really need to question that kind of transnational networks that are based on exploitation and horrendous acts of violence against vulnerable populations and against women and girls and children in particular. So I think that the recent developments that we are seeing is raising other questions rather than, why are you not standing up to Trump? I think we need to ask ourselves, how can we organize so that we are really holding states' representatives accountable? Because again, they have submitted themselves to international law obligations, and these obligations need to be respected. And how can we ensure, us as like social justice movements, how can we ensure that there is no impunity for the crimes that have been committed? And I think the last point that I would like to highlight is that not all leaders are remaining silent. There is also an organization of countries and of leaders who are standing up. I'm thinking of the president of Colombia. I'm thinking of, other countries. I'm thinking of the way, for instance, the president of Mexico has carried herself in the negotiations with its neighbor. And so I feel that it's not something like, it's not just like one block. There's a lot of nuances and layers that need to be addressed in that particular situation.
You brought up Epstein files in your response. From the circumstantial evidence as things appear right now, do you think there's a cover-up happening there? And from all the documents, millions of files that have been released?
I have no idea. I haven't come through the 3 million pages of the file, but what I do believe, other than the emails, it really is the testimonies of the victims. And they should have been believed without the emails, because they came forward and, a lot of them faced reprisals for coming forward. And that's what I believe. I believe them. I believe their testimonies. I believe that they have gone through horrendous levels of violations and never got justice for it. And so that is what concerns me. I don't know if there's a cover-up. I don't know if I have no idea. I think in the age of misinformation and disinformation and post-truth, it's going to be very difficult to know. But what I do know is that, victims and survivors and their families, they have come forward and they demand justice, and that should be granted due process, and that should be granted justice.
Sure. One last question. What are the main deliverables one could expect out of the Women Deliver conference? If you could sum up 3 or 4 deliverables that we could look forward to from the conference that's taking place in Melbourne in April.
So I think our main moment really will be the launch of the Playbook. And we are looking forward to not only launch it, but there will also be consultation circles. So there will be dedicated spaces to discuss the content on the playbook, to discuss its implementation. It will be a political declaration of what is it that we believe in, the principles that we are articulating our joint struggle around. So that will be kind of one key moment of the conference. We are really envisioning this to be a celebratory, a joyful moment, even though it's very difficult to find joy in this particular political moment. And this is why it becomes all the more important to find it. And it becomes all the more important to continue to, center joy and love and solidarity in everything that we do. So that will be kind of one of the major moments of the conference. Another so-called deliverable is like we're aiming obviously at delivering a conference for the movement that has been co-created with a lot of organizations from different movements that we've been working in very close collaboration with different partners to build the program, to build the conference. And we're really hoping to deliver on that. And I think the last bit is like we do not see the conference as an end in and of itself. The conference is one global space in a series of different global spaces that are organized within multilateral spaces, but also by fellow civil society organizations. We see Women Deliver as one stop. But the conversation is ongoing. What happens with the playbook will also be collectively discussed, how we implement it, what is it that we do with it, how we can use it to facilitate our transnational organization. All of that will continue to be fleshed out and discussed after the conference.
Well, I wish you all the best for the conference and hope it's a great success, and it goes a long way in creating a more just a more gender equal world where, women and transgender and the LGBTIQ community, human rights are respected. So yeah, I wish you very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.